It was a cold, silent morning in the small town of Willow Creek. The sun had yet to rise, leaving the sky a deep, sleepy gray. Inside a cramped one-room apartment tucked behind a rundown mechanic shop, a man sat cross-legged on the floor, gently rocking two tiny, wailing infants in his tired arms. His name was Samuel Brooks, a man of little means but limitless heart. His twin daughters, barely 2 months old, were all he had left in the world. Behind him, his wife, Marlene, zipped up a worn suitcase, her movements sharp and final. Her face was cold, her heart already miles away. "Marlene, please," Samuel's voice broke as he cradled his daughters tighter, their cries piercing the stillness. "Don't do this. Just give me a little more time. Things will get better." Marlene didn't even glance his way. She tossed her battered shoes into the bag and snapped it shut. "I've waited long enough, Sam," she said, her voice ablaze. "I'm tired of grease, dirt, and empty promises. I'm not going to rot here with you." "What about the girls?" Samuel pleaded. "They're your daughters. They need you." Marlene laughed bitterly, her smile a slash of resentment. "They need more than a broke mechanic who can't even afford a real home." Without another word, she slung the bag over her shoulder, opened the door, and left. Samuel stood frozen, the chill of the morning air rushing in as the door slammed behind her. He looked down at his daughters, their small faces scrunched in fear and confusion. "It's okay, my little angels," he whispered. "Daddy's here." That night Samuel didn't sleep. He warmed milk over a tiny stove, holding his daughters close, whispering promises into the stillness. Promises he had no idea how he would keep. The next morning, Samuel bundled the babies into a handmade cot and carried them into the garage. The old tin structure rattled in the wind. He placed the cot safely near his workbench and picked up his wrench. Cars sputtered in, bikes wheeled over, and Samuel worked, sweat dripping from his brow, checking the cot between every repair. People laughed at him. A mechanic raising babies in a shop? Poor man. Foolish man. They jeered and sneered. But Samuel swallowed every insult and tightened every bolt with a silent prayer. One evening, his old friend Henry Davis, a cab driver, visited. "Sam, this life is eating you alive," Henry said gently. "Take those girls to the orphanage. Give them a real chance." Samuel turned to him, wiping oil from his hands. "Never. They are my daughters, not burdens to be thrown away. I'd rather starve with them than live without them." Henry shook his head and walked away, leaving Samuel alone with his determination and his dreams. Years passed. Samuel worked from sunrise to long after sunset, fixing everything from engines to broken washing machines. His hands grew calloused, his back stooped, but his spirit never wavered. Isabel and Ivy Brooks grew into bright, determined young women. At 17, they passed their university entrance exams with flying colors, both dreaming of becoming doctors. But the price of their dreams was more than Samuel could ever hope to afford. That night, Samuel sat by the cold fireplace, staring at the only thing he truly owned, his garage. He thought of the years he spent bent over engines, the memories hammered into the walls like nails. The next morning, he made a decision. He called Henry. "I'm selling the shop," he said. Henry nearly dropped his coffee cup. "You're selling your life, Sam?" "I'm investing it," Samuel said softly. "In my daughters." Henry tried to argue, but Samuel's mind was set. A few days later, he sold the garage to Mr. Landry, an old businessman who admired Samuel's sacrifice and gave him a fair price. When Samuel handed the envelope of money to his daughters, their eyes filled with tears. "Daddy, you didn't have to," Isabel cried. "I did," he said simply. "You were my future." At university, Isabel and Ivy worked harder than anyone. They studied by candlelight when the electricity went out. They ate plain bread when they couldn't afford a proper meal. They never complained. They remembered the oil-stained hands that had cradled them through every storm. Back home, Samuel lived simply, surviving on little. But his heart was full knowing his daughters were chasing their dreams. The townsfolk mocked him still, whispering that he had wasted his life, but Samuel only smiled and said, "Just wait." Years later, on a bright spring morning, Samuel sat in the front row of a grand auditorium, his heart hammering against his ribs. On stage, dressed in white coats and beaming with pride, stood Dr. Isabel Brooks and Dr. Ivy Brooks, his daughters. As they descended the stage, they ran to him, kneeling, clutching their degrees. "Daddy, we made it," they sobbed. Samuel wept openly, unashamed. You've made me the richest man alive." Later that year, the sisters revealed a surprise. They had saved every penny from part-time jobs and secured a small loan. They had built a hospital, Brooks Hope Medical Center, named in Samuel's honor. The hospital stood tall, glass walls gleaming in the sunlight, nurses bustling inside, patients filling the waiting rooms. Samuel was treated like royalty. Everyone called him Papa Brooks with reverence. One rainy afternoon, a woman collapsed outside the hospital doors, frail and sick. Isabel and Ivy rushed to help her, refusing to ask for money first. They saved her life. She was given a job cleaning floors to pay off her debt. Samuel visited the hospital one quiet afternoon and noticed the cleaner, an older woman with rough hands and weary eyes. Something about her was familiar. "Linda," he whispered. The woman turned, gasping. It was Marlene, his ex-wife, the woman who had abandoned him and their daughters decades ago. In the privacy of a quiet bench, Marlene confessed. After she left Samuel, her rich second husband abandoned her when she couldn't bear children. She lost everything. She worked odd jobs, fell sick, and ended up on the streets until Brooks Hope Medical Center saved her without knowing who she was. Samuel's heart was heavy. When Isabel and Ivy approached, Marlene fell to her knees and revealed the truth. "I'm your mother," she cried. "Please forgive me." There was a long, aching silence. Then Isabel and Ivy knelt and embraced her. "We forgive you," they said, "because Daddy taught us love stronger than hate." Marlene moved into their mansion, but Samuel never allowed himself to fall back into the old wounds. He treated her with politeness but kept a firm distance. He had made peace with the past but refused to live in its shadow. However, Marlene's heart was not truly changed. Jealousy festered as she watched the love Samuel received from their daughters. She began speaking ill of him, sowing discord, until finally Samuel had enough. He asked Isabel and Ivy to buy Marlene her own home, and they died a comfortable apartment not far away. At first, Marlene lived quietly, but soon she fell into old habits. Word spread that she was spending the daughter's allowance on a young man, lavishing him with gifts and money. When confronted, Marlene showed no shame, insulting Samuel and calling him a worthless old mechanic. Broken-hearted, Isabel and Ivy cut her off financially, choosing peace over chaos. Marlene, desperate and bitter, spiraled further. She hired a thug to kill the young man who had scorned her, then plotted an even darker deed to have Samuel killed as well, believing that without him she could reclaim her daughter's love. But fate intervened. The thug, once a boy Samuel had saved from starvation years before, could not bring himself to harm the man who had shown his family kindness. Instead, he confessed everything. Marlene was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Samuel and his daughters chose not to attend the sentencing. They had already chosen life, peace, and the future. 2 months later, Isabel and Ivy were married in a double ceremony filled with laughter, music, and endless love. Samuel sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the journey from a greasy workshop floor to a life surrounded by joy. And as he watched his daughters dance under a sky full of stars, Samuel Brooks knew he had won. Not with wealth, not with power, but with love, sacrifice, and the kind of resilience that nothing, not poverty, betrayal, or even time could ever defeat.